Hello and welcome to the Startups of London podcast. I'm your host Ozan and the founder of Startups of London. Today I'm joined by Alex Kiely, General Manager of Choco. So Choco is a platform that connects restaurants and suppliers, improving the order process to save time, money, and food. And I think it's really interesting as a business because it has a social component to it that I can feel already. Welcome to our chat, Alex.
Hi, Zen. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So can we really decrease the food waste with a better system?
Yeah, I truly believe so. So if you look at the global food waste issue, right, about 40% of the food that we produce is wasted. And if you look at population growth, right, we're going to be 10 billion people in the next 5, 10 years. And so we need to find a way of feeding those people, right? And unfortunately, there's not an unlimited amount of space. So actually, by making the food industry more efficient, actually, we don't need to create more farms or produce more. We just need to allocate it more efficiently. And I mean, that's pretty all we're trying to do here at Choco.
You know, I've grown up in a society where it was considered a big sin to throw away food, right? I'm not a very religious person, but that was like the cultural belief. It is one of the worst sins that you can do to waste food. And I think that comes with societies who have, at a certain level, experienced hunger, famine, or like those disruptions. But there's kind of an irony in that now most of the waste happening around the world. Do you have any statistics, a map that you could perhaps paint to us in terms of which societies are contributing to food waste, how that whole system is working?
Yeah, so I think food waste in general, it can't be sort of throwing the blame to one country, one industry in particular, or so on. And the reason for that is because the food system is truly global, right? I mean, if you go into a supermarket and you want to buy bananas, maybe from South America or wherever it is, or you want some quinoa, the amount of the journey that the food has to take to get into that supermarket means it's a truly global issue, right?
It is.
And what that means is it's not simply enough to go into, I don't know, the UK and to solve it there. It has to sort of be a global commitment, right? And what we find in sort of business or with problems in general, if you don't have clear ownership of a topic, often things do not get resolved well. And I think that's what we're trying to do here at Choco. I think when we look at our business, for example, what we try and imagine ourselves as is kind of this third generation business, right? So you have the first generation business, which is a company, let's say like Shell or BP, where, they have a pretty negative impact on the world from an environmental perspective. But at the end of the year, they'll make a 100 million donation to kind of like say, hey, sorry, we'll offset that. Sorry about that. But look at us, we're very good because we're donating.
Yeah.
And then you kind of have the second generation business, which is like Patagonia, for example, which is neutral, like great company. But actually, every time you buy Patagonia stuff, it doesn't have a negative impact, but it also doesn't have a positive impact.
Oh, yeah, I see.
And what we want to do with Choco, the third generation company, is that every time someone interacts with the platform, we're having that positive impact on food waste and all the environmental impacts that happen by reducing food waste. And so that's what we're trying to do. And in order to make that actually efficient, we need to be a truly global business. And so right now we're present in the US, across the whole of Europe. But ultimately, we want to be present in every country in the world because that's the only way that you can really, truly make a massive dent on it.
How does that happen, though? And perhaps to answer that question, we need to understand who your customers and who your users are.
Yeah, sure. So at the moment, we have a platform that connects restaurants and their direct suppliers, right? And so to understand it, you probably need to understand why a restaurant would want to use Choco and why a supplier would want to use Choco. So the typical chef here in London probably has 10, 11 different suppliers, right? So they have the meat supplier, the fish supplier, bread supplier, cheese supplier, and so on. And they probably have 3 or 4 people collaborating on orders in the kitchen. And so every night they probably spend around 20, 25 minutes scribbling on pen and paper. Hey, we need 2 kilos of that, 2 kilos of that. Then they spend a lot of time leaving voicemails. They don't know if things are in stock. Often the wrong food is delivered because, I say, hey, I want 2 kilos of tomatoes, but the produce supplier has 25 kilos of 25 different varieties of tomatoes. And so what this means is then there's a lot of mistakes with orders. When the order's a mistake, because goods are perishable, it means they often have to be thrown away, right? And so what we do with our platform on Choco is we streamline that ordering process to mean there's 0 mistakes and the chefs are able to order more accurately and precisely via better inventory and more precision around the orders. And then if you look at the supply side, they have the same issues, but times 500, right? Because they have 500 customers. So every night they're getting maybe 300-400 orders coming in, all these voicemails. They maybe have a team of 6 or 7 customer support people who are, literally listening to voicemails, then manually keying these orders into ERP systems. If you're doing that at 2 a.m. in the morning, naturally leads to a lot of mistakes. And as we said, then they have to deliver goods and then can't be used because they're the wrong goods and then ultimately are thrown away. And so what we try and do with Choco is we try and streamline all these ordering processes via our technology that in order sort of reduces the amount of waste in that process.
Got it. In a way, you're acting perhaps something like a CRM system, the backbone of the ordering, order receiving, How many user types do you have? For example, from the perspective of the restaurant, is there a single person who is making the entries there? Are they the chefs?
No,
Do
no.
they have someone dedicated?
Yeah, so the great thing around it, I mean, when we started, right, it was a very basic platform, but now it's actually grown to be able to service the needs of, let's say, a local kebab shop,
Hmm.
actually to like a big restaurant group. So, for example, here in the UK, we work with restaurant groups like Sticks and Sushi, the Barafina group, and in those kitchens, right, you have like 6 or 7 people who are in the kitchen ordering. You may have 3 or 4 people in the bar, and then you might have the general manager of that location, and then the executive chef of the whole group, right? And
Mm.
so within the platform, people are allowed to have roles. It's almost like a group chat, but just designed for the gastronomy industry, right? And people can have different roles. So you can have people who contribute on orders, people who are then able to place orders, and then people who are simply able to view the orders. And yes, the whole idea is it becomes the platform that, everyone in the kitchen, everyone in the business sense of the restaurant uses to manage orders, and also to control how much they're spending and things like that.
Got it, got it. So the idea itself sounds quite simple, from paper to a digital version.
Hmm.
Lots of people can collaborate on it, so you can immediately tell it's going to be more efficient. But then comes the problem most founders face, which is, okay, how do we actually make this into a working product that is frictionless, that people have habits to use? And then this is a question of perhaps an iterative design process, as well as the conversations that you have with customers. So can you tell us a bit about that? I think this is really important context for other founders building products. How do you go from, okay, here's an idea. Yeah, it makes sense in theory, but now we actually need to make it work. What are the challenges as you scale that? How do you design it? How do you make sure it sticks?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a super good question. One of the things, and I think the reason why we've been lucky to be so successful here at Choco, right, is if you imagine our business, we're not a marketplace as such, but we do have 2 types of customers, right? So you have the restaurants and you have the suppliers. And often what you need to do then is balance the number of restaurants and the number of suppliers. But the great thing about Choco, right, is the way it's set up means that you can go into any restaurant in the world, and as long as their supplier has an email or a phone number, which is every supplier in the world, then we can technically make them on Choco. Because what happens is you can place an order in Choco, and then it will automatically generate an email or a WhatsApp.
Oh, I see.
And what this allowed us to do before getting all the suppliers legitimately on the platform, this meant we could go into any restaurant and meant we were able to grow very quickly and get a lot of user feedback quickly. And so I think it's really important to sort of nail in on what is the core value proposition. And to begin with, for restaurants, that was having all your suppliers in one place. If they had to send 2 orders via WhatsApp, 2 by phone call, 1 even by fax in Germany, which they used to do, and then 2 by Choco, it
Still?
wouldn't help them that much. Whereas if they're able to do all 10 orders via Choco, then it would save them a huge amount of time and it's all centralized in one place. And by really nailing on that and making sure that we were able to send the orders via email, by WhatsApp, by SMS, and by fax, that really enabled us to grow incredibly quickly because we were launching markets in San Francisco or Barcelona or Madrid or wherever it was. And in each of those markets, they have a different way of communicating, right? But the fact that we offered all those channels allowed us to grow incredibly quickly. And then beyond that, you can then just keep adding layers and going forward. But it's always important you keep sight of what is the main reason that customers are using the platform, and then what are sort of the nice to haves, right? Is that a new order flow going to really improve the process, or is it a little bit for vanity purposes, right? And always making sure that we're building towards the key value propositions that really make a difference for our customers.
Got it, got it. So tell us about the growth challenges you had. How many people do you have in the company currently?
In the company now, we have around 400 employees globally. So we've grown a huge amount in the last few years. And I think for us, what's important, right, is when you look at companies, often they talk about we want to have 600-700 employees, or we want to do this and we want to do that. But actually, in reality, that's probably the wrong way of thinking about it, right? What we want to think about is what impact do we want to have this year? That being how much food waste we want to reduce, what do we want our revenue targets to be, how many customers do we want to be able to help? And then you need to work back from that and understand how many people do we need in order to deliver that value and to hit those targets that we've set for ourselves. And when you grow, I mean, we're lucky to have a very great product and an incredible team. But the challenges when you're growing is just making sure you distill the culture, distill the vision into the team. Because really, in the end, as a founder or a general manager or whatever it is, your responsibility is to set that vision, to constantly explain why we're going there, why it's important, and not necessarily to say how we're going to get there, but giving the context about what we want to achieve and why we want to achieve it. And then everyone in the team is able to kind of put their stamp on it, take ownership for it, and really sort of deliver a lot inside those guidelines, if that makes sense. And so it's just about evangelizing the culture, the vision, the mission, why we're trying to do it. And if you do that well enough, and sometimes you're probably repeating yourself a huge amount, then if you hire a great team, they'll do the rest.
I have a love and hate relationship to the word culture because it's
Yeah.
so overused and so exploited at the same time, so important. So I'll not use it, but go with something else. I'll say
No, but
setting the
but
tone for the business, I guess.
yeah, but I think it's super important. I mean, on the culture piece, right? It's every time we interview someone, they ask us the question, "What is the culture like?" Right? And I'm pretty sure every startup that anyone interviews in the world will say we have a great culture, right? But within Choco, it's not about four letters on the wall. Right? We talk about tofu, but it's not about things that are written on the wall. It's actually the actions we sort of live by, and we talk about having this high performance environment, right?
What is tofu?
It stands for team ownership, focus, and understanding.
Team
Um,
ownership, focus,
Focus and understanding. And so those are
understanding.
the four values we drive towards. But I think where cultures go wrong is if you just have those four words, that can mean 100 different things to 100 different people, right? I think what's really important then is when you distill those values, you need to come down into actions and very concrete steps, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, we drill down under ownership and we onboard people saying, hey, what does ownership mean? Well, ownership means, okay, when I see a problem, instead of letting it pass and think, okay, that could be someone else's issue, I take ownership to either go and fix it myself or to highlight to the relevant people who are actually able to fix that. And so the more you're able to drill down and give very clear guidelines on what it means, the easier it is for people to live up to those values because there's so much context around it. People don't have to think, is that the right thing to do? And in that way, you get everyone acting in the kind of same framework and the values you want to live by without someone having to explain it and have the ambiguity behind it.
I couldn't agree more. I think the founder, the general manager, there was a time, I'll be honest, where I thought hierarchies were bad things, but no,
Mm-hmm.
they're not. They can be bad if they are pushing people who are not with the good intentions or don't have the right skill set to the top. But hierarchies are a decent way of organizing information and organizing the flow of some relations in some sense. It's just
Mm-hmm.
what type of a hierarchy you have becomes what's a good hierarchy type of a question. So there's always that, I think, a certain hierarchical component to businesses because of the nature of things, right? The information doesn't go into a pool and everybody doesn't have the same insight into things. And as an indirect result of that, I feel the executive team's actions, they almost appear through a lens in which they go through to the other teams exaggerated. So there's a certain sense of responsibility that comes with that, right? So setting the right tone becomes just like perhaps raising children. Your actions are mimicked and copied by other people. Do you experience that at all? People watch how you deal with a certain issue, for example,
Yeah.
how you deal with frustration, how do you deal with underperformance, how do you deal with uncertainty, and then it kind of acts like a signal. Okay, in this company we do it like this, right? Or this is what management wants, and then it turns into this. It has its life of its own, and then evolves into something of a monster sometimes, and
Mm.
sometimes something of a force for good.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why at Choco we say there's no such thing as a bad team, just bad leaders, right? Because people mimic what the leader does. And I think that's why it's super important as
I
a leader.
like that. Yeah.
You need to self-reflect on it. And often I think the most difficult part and the most frustrating part as a leader, right, is often when you're frustrated with something that's not going right in your team, it's because you haven't set the right tone right and people are just copying your example. And I think that's the most challenging part about leadership, right? But it's also important to understand, when we talk about where we want to go towards and the leadership values we want to represent, it's also important for leaders to understand it's aspirational, right? You can't always be this sort of superhero and get there. And I think what teams respond to is just when you're transparent about that and say, look, this is the person I want to be, this is the leader I want to be for you. At some points I will mess up. I will not be able to live by it, but please let me know when I'm doing that so I can correct faster. And I think if you have that desire to be the best leader you can be and really truly try and help your team and help them reach their goals and by default help the company reach their goals, then people will forgive a lot from a lot of your flaws, right?
Indeed, indeed. From a perspective of potential consumers, I'll ask this question, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know the answer, but honestly, I'm curious about it. There are some businesses, as you talked about, three stages of businesses. You've put like BP, Patagonia, and companies like Choco.
Yeah.
So a negative, neutral, positive impact.
Yeah.
There are a lot of companies who do not actually profit. Some companies do not owe their existence to the fact that they're being a positive impact creator for the world. And then it comes as an afterthought because it really works well as a marketing perspective, perhaps.
Yeah, sure.
How can a consumer make the differentiation between these two types of businesses? I.e., if you were to perhaps challenge this perspective a bit, how do we, when we take a look at Choco, know that you're not a company who has added the waste less, save more angle as an afterthought versus that being a core part of the business? How can consumers make that differentiation?
Well, I think in the end, it comes down to the consistency of the message, right? Now, if you start the business and the reason you start the business is for the mission. So our founder, Daniel, he spent a year from his previous project just investigating what he wanted to work on, right? And he had very experience in growing and scaling businesses. But in the end, it was, for example, the last product was a company called Vanny Day, which was essentially kind of like a treat well in the APAC market, right?
Yeah.
But in reality, he wanted to work on something that had bigger impact, right? That even if it fails after 10 years, he's still proud to work on. And I think he's really distilled that into all of us, right? And so, yes, it's a company that we want to make profits and we want to grow. But actually, in reality, if that's what you've started the business for and that's what everyone who joins the business is told that story and why to it. And if all hands, the senior leadership are talking about it and bringing back to that mission, maybe it's difficult from an outsider to see if it's genuine or not. But I think it's just a case of, I think we were talking a little bit before, right? You just have to keep showing up, stay consistent to it. And if you know within yourself and within the company that we have integrity around that, then ultimately others will start to see it too. And if they don't, then that's also fine. And it's just up to us to keep showing that integrity and that desire to live to our mission. And also internally to call each other out if we feel like we're going away from it. And I think that's something we do always in planning session, right? And always looking at, are we truly living our mission? Are we living to the values you want to have? And if not, that's also fine, but we have to create a path to get back on track with it. So yeah, I guess you can't say 100% from the outside. You just have to trust in yourself that you know that you're committing to it. And if other people choose to see it, then they choose to see it, right?
Yeah. I mean, numbers, consistency of the message, everything. But as we all know from greenwashing, it can be doctored, and statistics is an incredible tool to tell lies when it has to. So I guess it comes down to a certain level of gut feeling about the business. But that being said, it's not always that I find something new in these podcast conversations that truly fascinate me, because I've had a few number of them and I've been in the startup world for some time now. But I just want to reiterate and underscore something you said, because I just like it very much. What you said was, in the way that I phrase is, how can a startup be successful even if it fails, right?
Yeah.
In a way, even if the company ceases to exist at a certain time, and fail is in quotation marks because if it hasn't failed, right? But it created so much social impact and also positive impact for the employees and the people who work to build it as well. It's become a meaningful part of their life. So for the founders who are listening to us, and I think I'll take this as a form of insight for the next venture that I'm going to build as well. How can we build a company where it is creating positive impact for the people who work in it, giving them a sense of meaning, purpose, a good place, a good experience of professional work, and at the same time create positive impact for the world? And if the business fails, it will still be successful.
Yeah, 100%. I think also a big part of it comes down to ambition level, right? When we talk to our team, we talk about, look, we want this to be the best place that you ever work at, right? The place where even if you go onto a new opportunity, right, you look back at it and go, wow, those days at Choco were unbelievable. I learned so much. There were such great, driven, bright people who were also kind and great to work with. And the same thing is we want to build this truly generational company. Internally, we never talk about, there's a lot of companies say, hey, we want to be the Amazon of this, or we want to be the Shopify of that, or the Spotify of this. We never do that, right? Because we think that puts a bounds on the upper limits of what it is. We're Choco. We're not anyone else. And we want companies in the future to be talking, we want to be the Choco of this and that. And I feel if you put a ceiling on it, even if it's a huge, massive company that's done incredible things, then you're still putting a ceiling on the limits of your potential. And so the more you can set that ambition level high and high and high, I think the more inspirational and more fun it is to work on, right? The harder the problem, the more fun it is.
What was the biggest win that really made a difference in how people felt in the company from one day to the other? Sometimes there are these big B2B deals. Sometimes it's something else. Sometimes it's an investment. In your personal view, what was that key turning point for Choco?
It's a very, very good question, actually. So investment announcements are kind of a bit strange, right? Because it's not the investment should not be, it'll be celebrated, right? The investment is kind of like it's like a tick. Hey, you did good work. And so herefore you then get this much of investment. I think there's been a number of moments, right? Certain milestones and telling whether it's a certain number of restaurants on the platform, signing a deal with maybe a huge supplier, and there's one I think about in Germany that gives everyone the confidence and belief towards it. But I think what you sort of touched on there is when I think about it, when we're forming a new team, right? So personally, I've been involved in teams across Spain, the UK, and the US. The most important thing when you start a team, right, is everyone needs to believe that we will be successful and that we will achieve what we want to achieve. It will be difficult. There'll be days where we think we won't do it, but there needs to be this unwavering belief that we will be successful no matter what. And so when we launched in the UK 8 months ago, that was the most important thing, right? It's like the rest, we'll figure it out. If we have great people in the office, we'll figure it out. But there's always that moment, I feel, when we're working with the teams, when everyone kind of looks around the room, right? We've had a great win. We've persevered through it. There's been 4 or 5 pushbacks, whether it's, I don't know, a supplier blocking us, an integration going wrong, customers just not understanding the value to begin with. And there's just that moment, whether it's acquiring a customer that we've been chasing for months, and then everyone just sort of has that aha moment and that true sense of belief. And then the rest looks after itself, right? It's kind of what I said earlier. It's just, if you've got a great team, it doesn't matter what the problems are, right? The biggest problem we face now, we'll look back in a year's time and say, wow, that was easy. The one we're facing now is 10 times harder. And that's why it's just so important as a team. When you have that self-belief and you have that vision, then the team has that muscle of solving problems on its own. And it doesn't matter what the problem is, we will solve it. And that's really when you get into a really powerful place as a team and a company.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And the problems get bigger, but you get stronger as well as a team.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, for us as a company, right, we've been through a huge amount of adversity in a short amount of time. So if you look at most companies in, I don't know, VC's portfolios, majority are kind of like sort of e-commerce business, right? And so even though COVID was a terrible time economically, many of these companies were absolutely booming, right? You look at Shopify and companies like that, just everyone was going online. And so if you were involved in a tech business, in general, you did pretty well from it. Whereas for us, we were working with restaurants and restaurants were closing because no one could go to them. And there was some on delivery, but not as many as people thought. And so literally we had sort of 2 years work that kind of just all the graphs almost go down to zero. And we had to work through that and get through it. We went to, and we chose to keep pushing and pushing through it and looking for solutions, right? We didn't do furloughs. We didn't do this kind of stuff. We actually went to markets that were open and carried to grow the business. We looked at ways to support our current users. And so you go through these kind of moments of COVID, not just 1 lockdown, 2 lockdown, 3 lockdown, in a business that's severely impacted by it. And that's really brought the team incredibly close together, right? And we go, look, if we can survive our customers not being open and actually not having so much utility for our product, and yet we can still grow enormously during that period, then yes, okay, if we have an issue with one customer or there's some market conditions that are making it challenging, doesn't really matter because we got through COVID, we got through other solutions and things like that. And so when you have that innate belief that we'll solve whatever problem there is, yeah, it's extremely powerful.
The good thing with Choco that I can tell is it has some experience as a company, different parts, old world in Spain, in US. So I guess my next question is perhaps intended to help entrepreneurs, founders, people understand the UK ecosystem a bit better. That's one of the missions that we had from day one as Startups of London, because there was a lot of content on startups that most of them have been created by Silicon Valley and so on. But we've always thought context and location-specific information, culture-specific information is also really important. That's why we have a media company and a podcast and everything that is focusing on London-based startups. So with that in the back of our minds, what can you tell us about the way the UK system, UK ecosystem marketplace works that is kind of perhaps different than how it works in Spain, kind of different from how it works in the US? Especially in terms of growing a business, right? In terms of finding the channels to grow the sales, growing the business. What are the things that work other places but don't work here? And the opposite, that perhaps don't really work well in other places but work great in the UK?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a great question. I mean, from my perspective, UK and London in particular is just an awesome place to be involved with a startup. So I spent 2.5 years in Spain, and I love Spain. I love the culture there. People are fantastic, and the culture for food and life is just beautiful. But their proactivity to adopt technology is definitely a lot slower than in the UK, right? So I often met with a supplier maybe 10, 15 times over the course of 2 years, sort of evangelizing, okay, we need to think about digitizing because maybe it's not the most efficient way to have, you know, your sales reps going into every shop and placing the orders and then the next day having to go back for deliveries. And, you know, it took time to understand, and it really, a lot of it's investing and trusting in relations with people. Whereas what I've been really pleasantly surprised with in the UK here, people are always thinking about how they can improve their business, right? Even in an industry like the food industry, which is particularly antiquated in some ways, and being able to work with people who are constantly thinking about how to drive their business forward, it means they're willing to take risk on new products. And instead of the question being, okay, why do I need to do this? They know why they need to do it. It's just, hey, why are you better than X competitor or Y competitor? Why should we work with you? And when you're working with customers who are asking you those questions, it forces you to be better. It forces you to improve your product and really solve their problems deeply. And so I think if you're...
Sorry to interrupt, but just I think you said something important. I don't want to miss that.
Yeah, sure.
Perhaps it's not about selling the idea that, okay, there's a digital transformation here that can make your business more successful. People have already been onboarded to that. The question is, why you and why this company, right?
Yeah, exactly. 100%. And
credibility, I guess, is what I'm driving to.
yeah, 100%. And I mean, when you launch in a market, right, you have nothing. So Choco could be a 1.2 billion company or whatever, but the person in New Covent Garden Market who's been running their produce business for the last 25 years, they don't care about that. They just care, can you solve their problems? Can you help them? And I think what's really important is that so when you come into new markets, you've got to come with that sort of humble mindset, truly understand their business, understand if we can help them, first of all. And if we can help them, what does that look like? And I think the deeper you can get into people's business, understand what's worked for them and their current solution, what's not working so well, what are they trying to achieve, what are their sort of dreams of the business, and can we help them achieve it? And more often than not, the answer is yes, but the key is really getting to know them and understand what they're looking for, and then just making sure we work incredibly hard to deliver it to the standard they're expecting.
I mean, as a business, Choco does excite me. I'll admit. I like your mission. I like the way that you've built the team. I like the message that has echoed through the corridors, let's say, from the founder in terms of the value of the business, especially with the emphasis of, okay, businesses come and go, but how do we make a positive impact? And I think you're sincere. The company is sincere in that. Like, I definitely am very skeptical with these, but I buy it, right? I understand, and I like it. I like it very much.
Thank you.
Because it also shapes the conversations you have with the team members as well. And perhaps with that, my last question, how do you see talent retention as an issue? Perhaps you could tell us, the people who join Choco, do they come and leave in like 3 to 6 months? Do they stay longer? What type of people do you usually recruit for?
Yeah, great question. So I think people stay at Choco for a long time. I mean, myself personally, I'm at over 3.5 years now, right? So probably have a slightly biased impact to it. But yeah, I think the people we bring into Choco in generally are very passionate, ambitious people who want to work with bright, intelligent people who are also pushing for the same mission. I think in terms of retaining talent, right? In the end, if you've recruited well, what do people want? They want to have impact and they want to have clear ownership, and they don't want to be weighed down by bureaucracy and things getting in the way. And so one of my key challenges is that as we scale the business, right? It's not about what I do on a day-to-day basis. It's more like, what can I take away from our team that allows them to focus on what they're great at? Or what can I take away that allows that person to have impact? Or how can we put this person who has incredible skills at XYZ onto that project that means they can 10x their impact in the business? And really, that's what it is. It's about, if you can get really great people and you give them a very clear mission, you give them freedom, you give them ownership, then they'll achieve great things, right? And then the minute you start weighing them down and you put constraints on it and you start blocking them from things and there's too many processes and it's hard to get anything done, then that's when you get great people leaving, right? And we're lucky that we're also growing a lot, and obviously people want growth opportunities. And what we always say to the team is, hey, look, the more we grow, the more opportunities there are. So if everyone's incredibly focused on growing, then we'll make sure to help you get there and make sure that, we work on the skill gaps you have in order to fulfill your dreams. And so, yeah, I think it's something we're very proud of. You can always be better at it, of course. But I think if you ask most people who work here, they truly love it, right? It's very unique.
It sounds unique. I like what you're doing. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining the podcast. And I wish the best for Choco and the whole team there.
Thank you very much, Ozan. Real pleasure speaking with you. I really enjoyed it.